Hi and welcome everyone. We will start in about 3 minutes. Hi and welcome everyone. We will start in about 2 minutes. Hi and welcome everyone. We will get started real soon. Okay, we will get started. I think we're at a quorum. I see a couple of familiar names. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining the new features of the Apex Toolkit. My name is Dunne. I am a senior Salesforce advocate at DocuSign, and I work for our developer programs team. Today, I'm here with Salesforce experts Neel Kumar, who is Salesforce engineering manager, and Rafaeli Arroyo, sorry, Rafaela, I'm terrible at names, who is a software engineer who works on our Salesforce product. We're so excited to have both of you here to walk us through the new Apex Toolkit features we just released. And with that, I'll hand over to yourself, Neel and Rafi.
Thanks for having
Sorry.
us.
I'm lying to you. I'm so sorry. I'm going to hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Lauren. Housekeeping, just a few things to go over before we get started here.
So as mentioned in the chat, you are placed in a listen-only mode. If you have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions as they occur to you. We'll answer via the Q&A box or let you know we'll answer them live. Right-click is your friend here. To save your questions and answers, simply right-click on them and copy and save to your desktop or document. Also, you can unmute yourself. You are free to speak with us live during the Q&A session if you'd like. And also, before we start, we just wanted to do a quick double check. Neel, could you go to the next slide, please? All right, is this webinar for you? Well, this webinar is for developers. It's a little more technical in nature. We'll be showing a coding demo. If you're not a developer, you're welcome to stay, or you can check out this alternate resource. And lastly, you should see a quick poll on your screen in just a moment. If you can answer those questions, that will help us understand where you are in your development journey and enable us to customize content for this and future webinars. So I'll start the poll, and then with that, I will turn it over really and truly now to Rafaeli.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Cool. So here's what we have for the agenda today. So first off, we'll be talking about DocuSign and the DocuSign Agreement Cloud, what it is and how that ties into our company's goals. Then next, we'll be talking about the Apex Toolkit itself, which is the main topic for today. It's part of our managed package on Salesforce. We'll be talking about what it is exactly, which will help those who are not yet familiar with it. Then we'll be diving into the Apex Toolkit features, what's been around and what's new. Then finally, we'll be providing a demo of some of the new features for Apex Toolkit. So in general, we'll be answering questions throughout this webinar, but at the end, we'll answer any remaining questions and also provide some useful information for more of our upcoming webinars and developer resources.
Hi, this is Neel. The DocuSign Agreement Cloud is our way of reminding our customers that we are not just an e-sign company. While e-sign continues to be a strong cornerstone for our company, we're also helping our customers by supporting all parts of the agreement lifecycle. Prepare, where we generate documents and negotiate with counterparties. Sign the documents. Act allows customers to define business rules so that when the counterparty has signed the documents, further steps can be taken without manual intervention. And finally, manage. Our customers are generating thousands, sometimes even millions of signed documents. Being able to search through them, classify them, and store them in the appropriate storage systems brings great benefit to our customers. DocuSign Apps Launcher, which is what our managed package in the App Exchange, allows users to generate and negotiate documents, as well as send them off for signature. This package is used to be called DocuSign e-signature for Salesforce Essentials. So don't get confused if you see that name. Henceforth, we will be referring to DocuSign Apps Launcher as DAL. A lot easier on our rolls off the tongue faster. So what is the Apex Toolkit? It is part of the DAL managed package. It is a set of classes and methods that the DocuSign Apps Launcher, the DAL UI invokes, and is available for our customers to invoke as well. And it allows our customers to leverage the DocuSign APIs to customize the experience while staying within the comfort of Apex. So why use Apex Toolkit? Our customers are free to use the raw DocuSign APIs. But the true strength of our API toolkit lies in the fact that you can simply call an Apex method and get a response without needing to delve into the heavy lifting happening behind the scenes. You don't need to construct JSON payloads, call the appropriate endpoints, wait for the responses, understand what each error code means, and unmarshal the JSON responses. This makes your code easy to write, easy to understand, and easy to debug. Raf?
So before we start diving into more detail for the Apex Toolkit features, I like to go over some of the main terminology that we use when we begin the process of sending something out for signature. So to start off, an envelope is a container for documents for recipients to sign or view. And an envelope can contain one or more documents. And now a document is like the actual file within an envelope that requires signature and or can be viewed. Then the recipient is who obtains an envelope that needs to sign documents. However, recipients can have a variety of roles, such as a signer, a viewer, or an editor. And there can be multiple recipients as well. A recipient can be designated within a parallel or sequential order in the signing process. And by parallel, I'm referring to multiple recipients being able to sign within the process within like the same point in it. And sequential order refers to one recipient within a signing process, signing the envelope, and then the envelope gets passed to the next recipient in the sequential order defined. And next, the tab is a field on a document that's populated with data. It may or may not require a recipient to take action on it. And so a good example for a tab that doesn't necessarily require any recipient action would be like a date signed field. A date signed tab, which is something that is determined at the time a recipient signs an envelope. And other tabs that may require recipient action include like a signature tab where you provide a signature, or an initials tab. And then finally, a template is a blueprint of an envelope that has a specific set of documents, recipients, and tabs. So using a template is ideal for documents that usually are sent pretty frequently for signature. So a good example for that would be when sending out an envelope for an annual confirmation agreement for opening an account.
So currently, using the Apex Toolkit, you can create and send an envelope for signing, or initiate the envelope from within a trigger, a Salesforce trigger. You can also bulk send envelopes where multiple envelopes are created, each targeting a different recipient or set of recipients using the same base template or document. This could be used for things like annual disclosures, or when you need, if say you're in a subscriber system and you want all the subscriber to sign some disclosure or something like that. You can also use embedded signing. And for those who may not be familiar, embedded signing is when the initiator can sign the document without waiting for the signing URL to come via an email. So they kind of initiate the envelope, and then they are the first signer, and they just sign it right there and then move on. So you may be wondering, how can sending an envelope using the Apex Toolkit be useful? Let's consider the example where a company wants to close out the hiring process for filling a job position. There are multiple steps to take throughout the process, which include sending an email to facilities, to HR, maybe set up the new employee with ergonomics and other things, and of course, sending out an offer letter to the candidate. Now, let's say the first step can be done through a custom Aura or LWC component on the Salesforce org. So what about the second step, when the offer letter has to be sent? If you are doing the first step using your custom components, and then you switch to the DAL UI, you pick up the offer letter form and you fill it out and you set the recipient and go through multiple steps. It's a hassle. And you're now kind of you're making it a manual and potentially error-prone process. So what you can do is take that same component and essentially tack on the sending of the envelope to that same component. And so now what happens is that the sending of the offer letter part of the action is just behind the button that notifies HR, etc., and can be done efficiently using the Apex Toolkit. So through the Apex Toolkit, you can send an envelope programmatically. In particular, you can use Apex Toolkit service methods to embed the sending functionality into your custom components to send the envelope for signature. So not only would a custom component send the email to HR when prompted, it can also send the offer letter to the candidate within the same transaction, say, button click. When adding the code to the Apex code wired up for the custom component. And when preparing the offer letter to be sent, documents and recipients data from Salesforce can be automatically pulled in, used to, and that's how you send the envelope. And potentially this can grow into a bulk sending when hiring a large number of people, say, for example, seasonal positions. So how's the Apex Toolkit useful here? So based off the previous example, we were able to not only email HR and facilities, but we were also able to, within the same transaction, send off the offer letter, all without deviating from the established user experience. So this saves a lot of time that would otherwise be spent training and doing other various manual steps. You're also reducing chances for errors. And you can also customize how to handle exception conditions. So without needing to know anything about the HTTP response codes or error codes. And finally, it'll allow you to turbocharge your feature development and add flexibility in your business when using DocuSign API. And this is how you can add new functionality to existing UI and help your users be more productive. Raf?
Cool. So now that we did a bit of a deep dive into how the current Apex Toolkit features can be useful, let's talk about some of the new features that we now have available via Apex Toolkit. So the first one is being able to obtain user consent via the Apex Toolkit for DocuSign API transactions. So typically in DAL or the DocuSign Apps Launcher, this involves an administrator to add a user to their DocuSign account, and then for that user to complete an activation email and provide their consent through one of our managed package components. So this feature is particularly useful for the case where, for instance, a user tries to send an envelope via a custom component on their org. And let's say that user is not authorized to do so. And that's because they haven't not provided their consent for the DocuSign API to act on their behalf. So in that particular instance, instead of being stuck with the exception that the user is not authorized to send an envelope, instead, this custom component could be wired up with an Apex Toolkit method to instead redirect the user to provide their DocuSign credentials and hence provide their consent to proceed with the transaction. So that saves a lot of time with providing their consent. Otherwise, that user would most likely have to go through the DocuSign Apps Launcher themselves and then establish or place a Lightning component within the managed package in order to provide their consent there. So the second cool feature is being able to place recipient tabs on documents using the Apex Toolkit. Typically, this is done using a drag and drop interface when preparing an envelope for signature. So let's say you want to send out multiple envelopes with documents that are attached to your Salesforce record. And those documents more or less have the same layout. And so you kind of know where, you kind of have like a good general sense of where you would like to place those recipient tabs. So you can now use the Apex Toolkit to programmatically place those recipient tabs instead of having to manually place them via drag and drop for each of those documents. So the third new feature is being able to send multiple envelopes to recipients. And this is something that we refer to as multi-send. So instead of manually preparing envelopes one by one to each group of recipients, this can be done programmatically through the Apex Toolkit. So I want to keep in mind that this is slightly different from bulk sending, which in that case is meant for sending the same type of envelope and documents to recipients. So bulk sending is more ideal for when we want to use like a specific template to send the same type of documents to recipients. So this is, that's like more suited to like the previous example where we want to send multiple offer letters for the same type of job position. So this is different from multi-sending, where multi-sending, like a good use case for that would be if we want to send envelopes to recipients, for instance, that are each at a different stage of, say, an employee onboarding process. So there may be a company where there are multiple candidates that were hired at different dates, and therefore they're at different stages of an onboarding program, and therefore the envelopes that they would receive to continue with that program are at different stages depending on where they are within it. Another good example would be for multi-send would be if a company wants to complete a sort of like complex sales transaction that involves items from different vendors. So the envelopes that are sent are unique and respective to each of those vendors involved in the sales transaction. Finally, like a new feature for Apex Toolkit is unit testing. So unit testing to test the Apex code written and ensure the expected behavior when you use the Apex Toolkit service methods. So when using the Apex Toolkit to, for instance, sending envelopes, unit testing with Apex Toolkit helps to ensure that, say, the number of envelopes or recipients, documents look as expected. You can find more details on how to write a unit test involving the Apex Toolkit on our developers website. And now that we talked about some of the new features of Apex Toolkit, we'll be giving a demo on how to use them using the Apex Toolkit methods. So in this demo, we'll be showcasing primarily three things. So we'll be showing how to obtain user consent via Apex Toolkit to eventually trigger any transactions to the DocuSign API. And then we'll also be showing how to programmatically assign recipient tabs on an envelope for recipient action. And then finally, we'll be, after we place those tabs, we'll actually be demonstrating multi-send, where we are sending multiple unique envelopes to multiple recipients. So before we start, I did want to provide a bit of context for an example for this demo. So let's say I'm a financial advisor. I want to send out envelopes with documents to several households that need to sign a disclosure agreement for their brokerage account. So for this demonstration, we're assuming the financial services cloud on the Salesforce org. We have two financial accounts. So financial account A is an individual account in the sense that it's owned by one person account by the name of Jack Simmons, who is the primary owner. And then financial account B is a joint account in the sense that it's owned by two people. The primary owner is Nigel Adams, and the joint owner is Rachel Adams. So I think with that being said, Neel, if it's okay, I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, just a sec. Okay, so here I'm in my financial services cloud org. I have DocuSign Apps Launcher installed in this org, and the interface that you see here is the administrator setup. So let's say as the financial advisor, let's say the financial advisor within this list of DocuSign users is Apex user 1. So you'll notice that Apex user 1 has the status of pending, whereas the administrator, which is what I'm logged in as right now, is active. So when a user underneath this section is pending, then that means that user has not yet provided their consent to the DocuSign API to trigger and complete any transactions. So let's say user 1, which is the financial advisor, wants to send out envelopes to the Adams household and the Simmons household. So in my other tab here, I'm logged in as Apex user 1, as that financial advisor. And if you remember, I have not yet provided my consent to trigger any DocuSign API transactions. I went ahead and created an Apex class to showcase some of the Apex Toolkit methods that we described earlier. And within this Apex class, we'll be calling the send multiple envelopes method, which at the end sends the envelopes to the Adams and Simmons households. So as user 1, I'm going to attempt to send the envelopes by firing off the class methods, which utilize the Apex Toolkit methods for sending envelopes. So you'll kind of notice that the envelopes did not send correctly, and or rather it actually failed to send. And this is expected because as user 1, as the financial advisor, I've not yet provided my consent for the DocuSign API to do so. And so in order to do that, I need to actually provide my consent to DocuSign in order for that to happen. So in order to do so, I need to use an Apex Toolkit method called get login URL, which is part of the auth service of Apex Toolkit. So this get login URL method, which is part of my Apex Toolkit demo class, is what gets called by a custom component that I actually created and placed on my homepage layout. So in this page, this is the custom component that I was referring to. So it simply contains a button that, when clicked, actually calls the get login URL method that I wrote earlier. And when I click this button, then it should redirect me to start the consent process. And now, once I log in with my DocuSign credentials and provide my consent, I should be able to then send the envelopes. Now I have to click accept. Okay, so now I finished providing my consent to DocuSign, and the Apex Toolkit method takes in an argument, which is the relative path. So when using the Apex Toolkit method for get login URL as part of the auth service, you should provide, for this particular example, you should provide like a redirect URL that the user gets directed to after providing their consent. So this path really could be anything as long as this redirect page exists within the current Salesforce org. So for this particular demo, I wired up my custom component to redirect the user back to the original place from which the user triggered the transaction. So in my case, I had the user redirect to the home page in Lightning, but it could also be an Apex page or a custom Apex page or Visualforce page that you define within your org. So since I redirected to the Lightning page, you'll notice here at the URL that I have a query parameter called DFSLE status, and it returns success. So this basically means that the consent process was successful and the user is now authorized to trigger the DocuSign API transaction. So now that user one is able to send the envelopes, I'm not actually going to send them yet because I'll walk through like some of what's going on when we send the multiple envelopes, because here we specify what financial accounts we want to send envelopes for. And then we form an array for the financial account numbers and then ultimately send it through the method for sending multiple envelopes. Then afterwards, we save the sent envelopes to Salesforce, which is something that's super useful if, for instance, we want to track these envelopes, envelope status within Salesforce. Then finally, we view the status of those sent envelopes. We call the view envelope status method that I defined in my class. And the view envelope status method simply takes in the envelopes that we just sent and just logs that status. So before we send multiple envelopes, I did want to walk through like some of the underlying code here. So in the send envelopes method, it takes in an array of account numbers corresponding to the financial accounts that we want to handle. For this particular demo, I'm passing in the financial account numbers here, which correspond to the Adams and Simmons financial accounts. So once I grab those IDs, I use SQL to query other information related to the financial account. So for this case, I am trying to query for the primary owner and the joint owner person accounts information. Then in the next step here, I start preparing a list of envelopes that I eventually want to send at the end of this function. Then once I get all the financial account information that I need, I loop through each of the financial accounts and I call a method or function called create financial account envelope, which takes in one of the financial accounts that we iterate through. And then we actually add that to the list of envelopes that we build here before we send them off. So let's dive into the create financial account envelope method. So this takes in a financial account. At the beginning here, we create an empty envelope. We use the Apex Toolkit method envelope service .get empty envelope, which we link to our financial account based on their ID. And then the next step here, we obtain the documents data from Salesforce based on that financial account. So here we use the another Apex Toolkit method called get linked documents, which is part of our document service. So we obtain the content version document that corresponds to this financial account based on the financial account ID. Then next, we obtain the recipient's data from Salesforce based off of the account owner IDs that we queried earlier. And in order to get the recipient objects that we need for linking to our envelope, we use the recipient service Apex Toolkit method called get recipients, which uses a set of recipient IDs. So this get recipient IDs function is a private method that I wrote in this class that basically obtains the primary owner and joint owner IDs, the latter if they exist. But we always add in the primary owner IDs on top of the joint owner IDs when gaining the recipients that we need for this envelope. So after we have the recipients ready, I want to talk about like assigning the recipient tabs to those recipients. So in the next step here, that's exactly what we do. So we loop through each of the recipients that we get from Salesforce. And then we call this method called getRecipientTabs, which takes in an integer value known as signer number. So here we're actually using the signer number to dynamically calculate the recipient tabs that we place on our envelope. If we go to the getRecipientTabs private method, this simply returns the tabs that we want to use in our envelope. In this particular demo, we're using two. So we're using a sign here tab and the date sign tab. So for each of these tabs, there are specific arguments and properties that we can define here, as shown by the comments. And once we've defined those, we can simply return them from this function. So once we get those recipient tabs that we need, then we use the with tabs function with the tabs that we just created and assign them to the recipient for each recipient that we have for this particular envelope. And at the end of each loop, we increment the signer number to then recalculate any recipient tabs in case we have more than one recipient, so that those recipient tabs are where they should be. So now that we have the recipients and the documents properties ready for this envelope, there are a few more properties that we need to set, such as the email subject and email message. And then once we have all of those ready, we can just return the new envelope, which we then keep adding to the array of envelopes that we have here. And finally, once we have those, all of the envelopes ready, we're ready to use the Apex Toolkit method called send envelopes from the envelope service. So after we're done sending those multiple envelopes, we want to, for this demo, we want to track the status of those envelopes and ensure that their statuses are as expected. So this is what that view envelope status method does. So with that being said, I can go about and as user one, try sending out these envelopes. So if I kind of look at the debug logs here, you'll notice that there were two lines of the word sent being displayed here. So that's representative of two envelopes being sent, because again, we have two financial accounts and two households that we want to send envelopes for, and that's why we see two here. And the sent message comes from the view envelope status function, where we are simply logging it out for each envelope status that we query. And within this function, we are using the Apex Toolkit method called getStatus, which is part of the status service, in order to retrieve the status of the envelopes that we just sent. So now that I sent those envelopes, I actually created an inbox to gather the messages that would be sent to the Simmons and Adams households. So you'll see one for financial account A, so the Simmons household. And I'll just show you the signing experience here. So this document is for an individual account. And you'll notice there's already tabs here for me to sign. So this is the sign here tab that we just used via our Apex code. And this is the date sign tab. So because this is an individual account, there is a document that's specifically for individual accounts that differs from joint accounts. As you'll see later, when we go into the signing experience for the Adams household, there's actually like an extra paragraph within this letter, which indicates that the documents are different. And that's to, just wanted to point that out because when we're sending multiple envelopes via multi-send, we're sending multiple unique envelopes. So as Jack Simmons, I'll just finish signing here. And now I have completed the signing experience as Jack Simmons. So the next would be the Adams household. So I'll be signing first as Nigel Adams, since there were multiple recipients for this envelope. And like I mentioned earlier, I did mention that because this is for a joint account, therefore there is a primary owner and a joint owner for this financial account. There's an extra clause here that was not present on the document that was sent to Simmons. And so this pretty much confirms that they indeed have like different documents in different envelopes. So as Nigel, I'm gonna provide my signature here and finish. And now, since there's multiple recipients for this envelope, I again received this email, but instead of signing as Nigel, which I've already just done, I'm now going to be signing as Rachel. So you'll notice here, it's the same document, and then you'll see Nigel Adams' signature to the left. And now as Rachel, I have to sign here. So now that that's completed, I was able to receive the completion confirmation emails for Jack Simmons here, as well as the Adams household. And now that those envelopes have been completed, as an extra, if I wanted to, I could also view the status of those envelopes under the DocuSign status section. So this is the envelope that was sent to Jack Simmons. And then you'll notice that there are certain properties here that were updated. So we just completed the Simmons signature process. And so therefore there's like a timestamp populated for that transaction. And it's the same idea for the Adams household, where we know that from Salesforce, these envelopes have been signed and completed. So throughout that demo, we were able to show you how to obtain user consent using the Apex Toolkit, as well as programmatically place recipient tabs on envelopes to send off before finally sending multiple unique envelopes to recipients that need them. And I think with that concludes the demo. I think if it's all right, Lauren, I'll pass the screen to you, and then we can answer any remaining questions if we have any.
Sure. 1 second, and I'll pull up the presentation. Sorry. I was not ready.
I can share it.
Awesome. Thank you, Neel. That would make my life a little easier. Thank you.
Yeah, that works.
A massive thank you, Rafaeli and Neel. That was really, really cool. I'm so excited that we can do all this in Apex Toolkit now. I'm my jaw's dropped and I'm speechless, which if anyone knows me is a big thing, me not being able to talk. So I have a few questions that came in. People actually emailed me. But if anyone in the audience does want to ask a question, feel free in the Q&A section that Melissa talked about earlier on, pop your question in there. But for now, one question I did get was, where can I go to get more information? So if it's okay with Rafaeli and Neel, I'll answer this one. If you go to developers.docusign.com, and if you head over to APIs, there's e-signature for Salesforce, and that is where you can go and get your Apex Toolkit information. We've loads of code examples in there. We even have, as far as I know, the latest, which is this tabs feature. So there's loads in there for you. The next question I got, and I'll just throw it out to either Neel or Rafaeli, is can I use my current org to be able to use this function?
The answer is yes, as long as you have DocuSign Apps Launcher managed package installed.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. They were the only two I got. Is there anything else in the Q&A? I don't think there is. I will give it a second. Going once. Going twice. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This session has been recorded, so we will put this on the interwebs, also known as the YouTube channel, the DocuSign developers, or Developers for DocuSign YouTube channel. What else have I got to tell you? If you do have questions and you're feeling a little shy, don't worry, I don't bite. You can email your questions to developers@docusign.com, and either myself or a member of our team will follow up with you on your question. If you are feeling like you want to just chat or have more code examples and stuff like that, if you head over to Stack Overflow and tag DocuSign API, I personally answer those questions. So feel free to throw any questions you have in there. And as always, you can reach me at lauren.dunne@docusign.com. You've probably been hounded with emails from me at this point for this webinar. There is going to be a survey at the end of this webinar. I read everyone's feedback, good, bad, indifferent. I take that on board and it helps me develop more content and more webinars for our DocuSign for Salesforce customers. So please do give me that feedback. I will not be offended if you tell me that I have a terrible accent or I talk too much. That being said, was there something else? Yes, I did want to bring up tomorrow. I am hosting a DocuSign e-signature for Salesforce meetup. Again, it is 10 a.m. PT, 1 p.m. ET. And if you are in Europe, by all means, feel free to join us at 7 p.m. in London time. There's also going to be a hands-on workshop if you have not connected your Salesforce and DocuSign together. I will walk you through how to do that. So that is on the 9th of December, again, same time, because I need my coffee to kick in to be productive. We do have a few things coming up for the Dream TX. If you are aware of what's going on, Dreamforce has kicked off. It is Dreamforce Fever. So we do have a couple of things going on. We are part of a demo jam, which I am totally keeping that trophy when we win. So we are part of a demo jam. There's also going to be a watch party, an Ohana Coffee watch party, which will be hosted by myself, and there'll be a whole lot of Salesforce community people on there. So feel free to jump on and network. That's what I want you guys to do. I want you to network. We also will have a Going Beyond the e-signature with DocuSign CLM presentation, and that is at Dreamforce Dream TX. So that is also on December 17th. All of the Dream TX activities are December 17th. To sign up for them, feel free to go over to developers.docusign.com. Under communities, you will find that there is a section for e-signature for Salesforce webinars. I've already mentioned you guys are going to be receiving a survey. Other than that, I want to say a massive thank you to Neel and Rafaeli. Melissa, thank you for keeping us going in the background. I really do appreciate all your help. And I don't see any more questions, so we will leave it there. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.